Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gautama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/supportbuddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started for this evening session by welcoming all of you guys. Sawadee Kamp, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see you here. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Welcome back for those of you guys that have been here throughout the week at different times. We're going to start our evening with a meditation to do loving kindness meditation. This is something I taught this morning. And what we do is we ease into the meditation with chanting, which you guys have here. Jeannie's being polite to hand those out to you guys. And then I'll guide you in a short breathing mindfulness meditation session. Then it'll just be quiet for a period of time where we're doing just a little bit, maybe 3-5 minutes of meditation with breathing mindfulness meditation. Then we're going to move into loving kindness meditation, where I'll be doing these affirmations out loud. And as I do these affirmations out loud, you can repeat those in your mind on the out breath. Now, if I was doing this on my own, I would just do it quietly within my own mind. But since I'm guiding you guys, I'm going to be doing it out loud. So this meditation is to help you transform your mind away from anger, hatred, ill will, frustration, irritation, annoyance, all of those feelings like that will help you essentially rewire the mind so that you can be more loving and kind with active goodwill. And I'm doing this in such a way that I'm guiding all of you guys. So I'm using general statements, but when you do this for yourself, you would like to customize it for your own specific needs. This is to help you transform your mind. This isn't to send loving kindness to other people and change other people. It's to change your own mind so that you can be more loving and kind when you're around various people. So if you'd like to join, we're going to do that kind of in the middle. Then we'll go back to breathing mindfulness meditation for a period of time and then come out with chanting. And then we'll move into today's topic, which tonight's topic is understanding and experiencing the Jhānas. The light bulb is flickering. This is where we're starting to move into understanding the teachings that you need to get to the first stage of enlightenment. And this is a nice transition to help you understand what the Jhānas are and what you're going to be experiencing as you start experiencing these. So if you'd like to join for meditation, you can make yourself comfortable on the floor, in a chair, and I'll go ahead and start with the chanting, which you guys are welcome to join along if you like, and then we'll come in with the guidance for the meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakewa Potang Mahakewanhang Apiwateyami Sawakato Mahakewata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakewato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso mahakawa Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakhato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Oto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, establishing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Then I'll be back with more guidance on loving kindness meditation. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Repeat these affirmations in the mind on the out breath. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May we be peaceful. May we be safe. May we be well. May we be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May my family and friends be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all those who hate me be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all those who have harmed me be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all those who I have harmed be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all beings, wherever they reside, be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness and the suffering it causes. Now return back to breathing mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddhassa. to ma kewa Tang ma kewan hang api wa te mi Savakato ma kewata dhammo Dhammang namasami Supatipano ma kewato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso emakewa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusnang Oto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation, I will just once again welcome all of you guys, those of you guys that have been here and those of you guys that joined us since we started meditating, those here at the temple and those online. Welcome to all of you guys. This evening, we're going to be talking about understanding and experiencing the jhanas. The light bulb is flickering. Remember, everything that the Buddha taught is to move the mind to this enlightened mental state where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. And there's 4 stages of enlightenment. And when the mind is in the 4th stage, that's where the mind no longer experiences any discontent feelings whatsoever. So all the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the enlightened mind. But on the way to that mental state, there's various attainments that you're going to experience if you continue to stay dedicated and diligent to developing your life practice. The jhanas is one of those attainments. There's 4 individual jhanas, and then there's 4 stages of enlightenment. You'll see different people teach different things in terms of the jhanas and in terms of the 4 stages of enlightenment, but everything I'm sharing with you is based on the original words of the Buddha. You're going to see that I'm sharing some of the words of the Buddha here as I talk and I share these teachings with you. So the goal is to help you understand what these jhanas are, so that then as you're experiencing them, that you'll know that you're experiencing them. Because once you start experiencing these jhanas, which are heightened qualities of mind, you're going to need to pivot your practice towards really focusing on the 10 fetters. In order to get to the jhanas, you're going to need to put together those foundational teachings that I've talked about so far in this retreat. The 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, meditation training, understanding what is Gama, and understanding what is merit. Those are all things that we've talked about already in this retreat. And as you're putting that together and you're building up your practice more and more, dialing in that Eightfold Path closer and closer, you're going to start noticing these qualities of the mind referred to as the jhanas. if this translated to one English word, I would just use that word. Jhana and Gama are the only two Pali words that I still need to use because it doesn't translate to just one English word. This word jhana means meditative absorption or mental absorption. The mind has absorbed a certain amount of meditation in order to be able to get to this point, with all the other teachings as well. And it's absorbed a certain amount of the mental discipline and the teachings that actually are going to help you get to these jhanas. It's not just through meditation that you would get to these jhanas. You wouldn't be able to meditate your way to these jhanas. You would need other teachings besides meditation. So I'm going to share with you guys what these jhanas are and walking you through it and helping you to understand it. So first, let's just talk about what jhanas are in general, and then we're going to get really specific with this. So the jhana is this Pali word that essentially means meditative absorption or mental absorption, that the mind has absorbed a certain amount of meditation through gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. The jhanas are one of the first indications that you get that your mind is really, truly making some significant progress. Because remember, the teachings of the Buddha, it's not rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. It's not believing a bunch of things, hoping that you experience some beneficial result when you die. It's about learning now. It's about reflecting now and practicing now to uproot certain pollutions out of the mind. So those foundational teachings that I've been sharing so far, that's going to help you to a certain degree to reduce some of the pollution in the mind. And that's why these jhanas will start to be experienced. So between all the things that you were learning in the Eightfold Path and developing all of those teachings, you're going to start noticing these particular qualities. The mind is going to be relaxed and calm, but yet attentive and alert. There's going to be these deep states of concentration that are developed, and that you're going to be able to access these all throughout your day. You're going to notice these certain qualities. I'm going to show you the words of the Buddha throughout this talk, but we're ultimately going to get to a point where you can see the Buddha describing the jhanas, and there's very specific qualities that you're going to be able to observe and notice that the mind is experiencing. And those qualities are going to be experienced all through your day, not just in meditation. Sometimes people think that the qualities of the jhana are only in meditation, but you'll actually be experiencing these qualities all through your day. So these are 4 preliminary phases that the mind goes through before it gets to the first stage of enlightenment. Every single person who's making their way to enlightenment would end up experiencing these jhanas before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. You wouldn't be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment without experiencing these jhanas. By learning and practicing the Eightfold Path, and of course those 5 precepts plug into that, that's what's going to help you to be able to experience these jhanas. You'll see that the Buddha taught 4 jhanas in his own words. You'll be able to see this, even though you might see on the internet and in different resources and even in books where people will talk about 6 or 8 or 9 or however many different jhanas. The Buddha himself only taught 4 jhanas. But because we're 2,500 years after his death, some people have changed his teachings either directly or inadvertently. Because it's been an oral tradition for 2,500 years, it's been handed down from person to person, and it's been changed slightly here and there as we go. And that's why you're encouraged to not believe the teachings, but you learn them, reflect on them, and practice them so you can see the truth for yourself. So as you're starting to experience these jhanas, these 4 attainments or these preliminary phases that you experience before the first stage of enlightenment, you'll be able to verify that you're experiencing the various qualities that the Buddha talked about. And this is where it becomes quite real, that you start noticing that here's somebody that described something 2,500 years ago, and you practiced his teachings the way that he described, and here you are experiencing the exact qualities that he said that you would experience. And like I said, you're going to see that here in a moment. This is an indication to you that as you start experiencing these jhanas, that you're putting together the Eightfold Path really well. This is why I call it like the light bulb is flickering. With enlightenment, it's not like a light switch where it's an LED light where it just turns on and boom, and you're enlightened. You're going to notice that the mind gradually moves to this enlightened mental state where you're starting to experience more and more qualities of the enlightened mind gradually over time. You start noticing more and more of the brightness and the radiance of the enlightened mind shining through. So this is why I say that the light bulb is flickering, because like these old style lights, when you turn on the light, it flickers, it flickers, it flickers, it flicker, and then boom, it's on, right? So these attainments are like the mind is flickering. It's like the light bulb is flickering. You're starting to experience these various qualities of the mind. So as you're putting together the Eightfold Path, all those individual factors that I talked about and that you're dialing in closer and closer, you're going to need to revisit that multiple times, you'll start noticing these qualities of the jhanas start to arise in the mind. And you'll be able to track that and you'll be able to see it for yourself. At that point, once you start noticing the jhanas, your practice starts to shift, where everything that you've been doing so far up to that point is the Eightfold Path, the meditation training, practicing the precepts and all these other things. And you've been working to eliminate the 10 fetters, which are the 10 individual pollutions that are in the mind. But once you start experiencing the jhanas, you're already putting together the Eightfold Path fairly well at this point. So now your practice kind of pivots and it shifts, and you start really honing in on the individual fetters themselves. And this is why tomorrow and Friday, I'm going to start teaching you the first 3 fetters in detail. I'm going to explain to you what the fetter is, or what this pollution or what this taint or defilement is. Then I'm going to explain to you the symptoms that you experience in your day-to-day life because of this pollution of mind. I'm going to explain to you the tools and techniques of how to eliminate that particular fetter. And then I'm going to teach you how to know that that fetter has been eliminated from your mind. Because as you start experiencing these jhanas, you're going to need to start shifting and start to now focus on these 10 fetters more closely. So that's why it's important that you know what these jhanas are, so that when you're starting to experience those qualities of mind, you start now shifting your practice towards developing a deeper and deeper understanding of the fetters and now focusing on eliminating them individually. Even though everything you've been doing up to that point has been working to eliminate those fetters, you didn't necessarily know that because you're putting together the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, the meditation training, and so forth. But if you look at what you're learning in the Eightfold Path, in the 5 precepts, once you learn the 10 fetters, you can see how the Buddha was already guiding you in the foundational teachings to eliminate these pollutions and these fetters. So that's where you start shifting, because now you start noticing the light bulb flickering. And that's what's going to get you out of the jhanas and into the first stage of enlightenment, by focusing on the 10 fetters. If you didn't start doing that, you can kind of get complacent in those jhanas, or your mind can even regress out of those jhanas. But once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your mind can't regress backwards from that point. So every practitioner is going to experience these jhanas as you progress towards enlightenment. And it's important to be able to know what they are so that you don't get complacent and your mind doesn't regress backwards. And also so that as you're experiencing those qualities of the jhanas, they're almost like night and day compared to what you experience in day-to-day life in the unenlightened state, to now you've been putting together the foundational teachings and you're starting to experience the jhanas. The qualities that you experience in the jhanas, it's like night and day from what you've ever experienced in your life in terms of the focus and concentration and clarity of mind and the memory. And sometimes when people start experiencing these jhanas, they start clinging to those qualities. So you're going to need to start focusing on those 10 fetters and start moving through the jhanas and then out into the first, second, third, and fourth stage of enlightenment. So the jhanas are this temporary mental states. They're not meant for the mind to dwell there permanently. That as you're moving through these jhanas, they are qualities that you're building, and those same qualities are going to be with you all the way through the 4 attainments until you get to enlightenment. But your mind's not supposed to be in these jhanas long term in terms of, multiple years. It's not wise to cling to these qualities that you're going to start experiencing. So these jhanas are temporary, and the mind can regress out of them, and the mind can sometimes become complacent or arrogant and boastful when you're getting the experience of these jhanas. So as I mentioned here, the mind can regress out of those jhanas. So it's important that you remain determined, dedicated, and diligent in your practice. That whatever you were doing up to the point that led to the jhanas, it's important to keep doing that and now start focusing on the 10 fetters. These are improved qualities of mind that you're experiencing at all times of the day. These qualities continue to permeate in the mind and continue to heighten as you eliminate more and more of the fetters, more and more of those pollutions out of the mind. These jhanas are often mistaken for enlightenment itself, because oftentimes people experience these jhanas, like I said, it's like night and day from what you were experiencing when you were off the path to enlightenment, to even when you first get on the path to enlightenment, to now when you start experiencing the jhanas. So oftentimes people confuse them for enlightenment itself. Sometimes people describe enlightenment as ultimate bliss. Or some people say that when you're enlightened, you still experience sadness and anger and annoyance and disappointment and resentment and these kinds of things. This is because people are experiencing the jhanas, these heightened qualities of the mind. They don't understand what enlightenment is, and they're describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment because they're so different than what you've ever experienced before that somebody can mistake them for enlightenment itself. But if you're experiencing even the slightest ickiness in the mind is not yet enlightened. So in these jhanas, while your discontentedness has been diminished and reduced, you're still experiencing discontentedness. There's certain discontent feelings that you're still experiencing. It's less than before, and there's other heightened qualities that you're experiencing, but it's not enlightenment yet. You're still experiencing discontentedness to a certain degree, even when you're in these jhanas. So it's important not to mistake these jhanas as enlightenment. So if you're still experiencing any discontentedness, there's still craving, anger, and that ignorance or unknowing of true reality is still there. And then more specifically, the 10 fetters. And that's why you start to then redirect and start focusing on those. Let's talk about what the jhanas are not. They're not something to be boastful about. This isn't something like I've kind of joke about every once in a while. You're not going to call up mom and be like, hey mom, guess what? I'm in the jhanas. Can you believe that? Aren't you proud of me? I got a certificate at the temple for being in the jhanas. There's no certificate given out for anybody being in the jhanas, right? This isn't something you're going to put on your Facebook page and, talk about with your friends. You might talk about with your teacher that you think you're in the jhanas or you're starting to experience the jhanas and you'd like some help to be able to now move through them. But it's not something that you're going to go around and talk with your classmates about or your mom or your dad necessarily. These are things that are for your own personal growth and your own personal development. They're indications to you that the qualities of mind are improving because you're putting together the foundational teachings really well. So it's not something to boast about. These aren't something that you only experience during meditation. These are qualities that get produced by putting the entire Eightfold Path together. The Eightfold Path consists of 8 individual factors, and one aspect of one factor is meditation, right? When we talked about right concentration, that's where breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation plug in. But then there's also the practice of singleness of mind. So meditation is one aspect of one factor of the Eightfold Path. Sometimes people think you can just meditate your way to enlightenment or meditate your way to the jhanas. But if you were meditating 23 hours a day and then you went outside and you were bitter and harsh and hostile and aggressive with people, your mind's not going to be peaceful. Your life's not going to be peaceful and joyful, even though you're meditating, even though you can't meditate for 23 hours a day. But let's just say you were. If you go outside, you didn't understand right intention, you didn't understand right speech and right action and right livelihood and all these other teachings, you wouldn't be able to experience these jhanas. So meditation is there and it's important for you to do it, but you're not going to be able to meditate your way to this. You're going to need to build up your meditation practice, but there's other things you need as well before the mind starts to experience these qualities. The jhanas aren't something to crave about or desire or be obsessed about. Sometimes you might see people that are tracking each individual jhana and exactly what jhana they're in, exactly what jhana they're trying to attain. And there's almost this obsession about the jhanas. And if you're obsessing about the jhanas, if you're craving the jhanas, your mind's not going to experience it. Anytime there's craving in the mind's going to kind of retreat a bit. It's going to regress. So you would like to understand what these jhanas are so that when you're starting to experience them, it's like, all right, there they are. I see them. But ensure that you don't get obsessed about attaining them. And then once you are experiencing them, don't get all prideful and boastful and arrogant about that, because that's going to hinder you from being able to get out of the jhanas, because the mind can regress backwards. There's a lot of people that contact me and ask various questions through email and personal message and things like this. And it's frequently that I hear from people that have been studying other places and they experienced the jhanas and they didn't know what they were and they didn't know what to do once the mind got into the jhanas, and their mind started to regress out of the jhanas and they needed help to be able to get back into the jhanas and beyond. So oftentimes this individual, having experienced the jhanas for maybe a week or two and their mind regressed out of it, they start craving it, they start longing for it, they start yearning. It's almost like a drug. When you experience a high, you might start craving it and longing and yearning for it. These jhanas are beyond anything you've ever experienced. If you've used any kind of drugs or alcohol or anything like that, the state of mind that you experience is beyond anything you've ever experienced in terms of a illicit drug or anything like that. And by the time you get to enlightenment, it's well beyond that, right? right? So these jhanas are something that you're going to start noticing. These qualities come into the mind, but be sure that you're not craving them. Be sure you're not obsessed about them. The jhanas aren't enlightenment. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes they're mistaken for enlightenment. There's still work to do. The real work begins when you actually start experiencing the jhanas. If you start experiencing the jhanas, it means you've done a certain amount of work to get there. But now, once the mind's experiencing the jhanas, there's a whole lot more work that you need to do in order to eliminate all those 10 fetters and ultimately get to the enlightened mental state. These jhanas, they're not anything mystical or magical. It's not to determine who's a special person and who's, special and who's not. These are just attainments that you're going to experience, certain qualities of mind. So it's important to remain humble all the way throughout the path, because a person with ego or arrogance or pride or boastfulness, they're not going to be able to experience enlightenment. They need to dissolve that ego and eliminate the ego. So when you start experiencing these heightened qualities of mind, it's very easy for the ego to come in there and think that you're special or to think you're better than other people, because you're going to notice so many other people struggling in the world with a lack of concentration, a lack of focus, and you're going to have this high degree of focus and concentration. You're going to have this high degree of memory as you're getting closer and closer to enlightenment, because as you get rid of the pollutions of mind, your mind's going to start performing more optimally. So it's important that you don't think of yourself as special and you don't look down on other people who are really struggling with the concentration of their mind, but continue to remain humble, because that's going to help you to remove some of the conceit, which is one of the fetters in the mind. If you remain humble, you'll be able to then continue to make your progress to the first stage of enlightenment, which once you get there, the mind won't actually regress. Let's talk about the dangers of the jhanas for a little bit. Due to the drastically improved qualities of mind, the mind can become conceited and boastful, arrogant, prideful. You can start judging other people, like I just mentioned. So you need to look out for that the mind can potentially do that. The mind can become complacent when you're starting to experience these improved qualities of mind, or you can hold on to those qualities of mind, feeling like you need to hold on to them, and the mind's not able to then continue to progress to the first stage of enlightenment. With complacency, the mind will regress out of the jhanas. So if you get into those jhanas and you start experiencing these improved qualities of mind and you kind of flatten out with your practice and you don't remain determined, dedicated, and diligent, your mind can actually regress backwards if there's any complacency. You can notice this overwhelming excitement and joy, and it can be a challenge to restrain the mind due to the mind's not fully disciplined. You can really notice this happening in the mind, that there's this heightened state of awareness that is occurring. And because your mind's not fully disciplined, it can be a challenge to restrain the mind. So you're going to need to maintain your meditation practice and learning how to restrain the mind, not only in meditation, but in day-to-day life as well, because the mind can almost kind of unravel a little bit. It gets so excited sometimes and so blissful when it's experiencing these jhanas. You can notice these swings, this gladness and sadness, where the mind kind of swings back and forth. Because as you're starting to let go of these pollutions and the craving, desire, attachment, the mind will oftentimes swing to the other side. So you can notice this swinging of the mind. And that's where, if you maintain your practice of your meditation practice and all the other teachings on the Eightfold Path, you can stabilize the mind. So if you notice this swinging of the mind, this is quite normal, but just maintain your meditation practice, which will bring in more discipline and more control to the mind. There can be a significant amount of energy or surges of energy when you're experiencing the jhanas. This doesn't happen with everybody, but this can be experienced because as your mind is starting to become more liberated, you can notice this energy kind of surging in the mind. If you are putting together those Eightfold Path, because you're getting rid of that pollution, the mind really starts to brighten up and you'll start noticing this energy surge potentially. And as you're experiencing that, that's where you bring in the enlightenment factors of tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. There's something called the 7 factors of enlightenment. This is discussed in Volume 1, Chapter 3, where these are tools to fine-tune the mind. That the first one is called mindfulness or awareness of mind. And this is the same mindfulness that you learned as part of the Eightfold Path, the core central teaching. So you're going to need to be practicing that awareness of mind at all times. And then when you notice your mind is sluggish and complacent, you're going to need to bring in what's called the enlightenment factor of investigation, energy and joy, which uplifts the mind and brings it to the middle. And then when you're noticing the mind is excited or elated, you bring in the tranquility, the concentration, and equanimity, and that brings it to the middle. So these 7 factors of enlightenment is not to determine whether you are enlightened or you aren't enlightened. It's to fine tune the mind, and with your mindfulness, seeing it either sluggish or seeing it as excited, you can then bring in the appropriate enlightenment factors to either lift the mind up and bring it to the middle, or bring the mind down out of that excitement and bring it to the middle. So the 7 factors of enlightenment are something that you usually start paying a lot of attention to as you start to experience the jhanas, because you're going to need to go in and start fine-tuning the mind. So I'm going to pause here and see what you guys have any questions before we go further. If you have questions here, if you guys wouldn't mind using the microphones, we have people online that'll be able to hear you with that. There's a gray switch. You just press that and hold it up to your chin. And for those of you guys that are online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. Do you guys have any questions here or online? Anything we've been discussing so far? No? Okay. Let me see what we got online. So I'm not seeing any questions there either. Okay. So now let's talk about the benefits of the jhanas. The benefits are that it's an indication to you that you're developing the Eightfold Path and you're headed in the right direction. This is the first real big, significant indication that you're putting things together really well. You're going to notice smaller incremental improvements as you're going and as you're developing your Eightfold Path. I've had some students, even within 2 days of a 5-day course, they've come in on like the 3rd day in the morning and said, David, I got this email this morning that would have just shaken me up. I would have been so upset and discontent. But after the first 2 days of the course, I understood this email and it didn't shake me up. It was really quite surprising. So you can notice incremental improvements even in 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months. When you're learning the true teachings of the Buddha, you can notice those things. But here with the jhanas, this is like a real big indication that things are significantly coming together for you, that you've put together this Eightfold Path and you start noticing the light bulb flickering. These are improved qualities of mind that need further progress on the path to enlightenment. It's an indication to you that things are coming together. One of the benefits is that you no longer have a subconscious mind. Once you get into the 2nd jhana, you're going to see that in the words of the Buddha, that up until the 2nd jhana, there's a conscious mind and there's a subconscious mind. And your conscious mind is polluted with these 10 fetters, but the subconscious mind is even more heavily polluted. If you've ever been standing around talking to people before and you just blurted something out and you're like, why did I say that? That's not what I was thinking. That's not anything that I typically talk about. Like, why did I just blurt that silly thing out? This is the subconscious mind, that polluted mind, sending things up to the conscious mind that you might just blurt out, without really thinking about it. So you're going to need to have awareness of the entire mind in order to purify it. So by the time you get to the 2nd jhana, you now have experienced what's called unification of the mind, or oneness of the mind, where you can now see the entire mind. And there's no longer a conscious and subconscious mind, but you can just see the entire mind. And you're going to need that to be able to fully purify it. So you'll notice this in the 2nd jhana, that you'll be able to have full awareness of the entire mind. There'll no longer be a subconscious mind. You'll need to continue to cultivate deep wisdom in order to continue to grow on the path to enlightenment. As you're starting to experience the jhanas, some people refer to this as the opening of the 3rd eye, or the inner eye, or the divine eye, or the spiritual eye. These are things that people refer to it as. So that's what you're experiencing when the mind's now experiencing that oneness of mind, or unification of the mind, where you have full awareness of the entire mind. Some people refer to it kind of in shorthand. They call it opening of the 3rd eye, or the divine eye, the inner eye, or the spiritual eye. You have a certain amount of wisdom to know what is wholesome and unwholesome, wise and unwise, leading to improved decision making. You will have deeply understood the natural law of karma by the time you get to the jhanas. There's still more that the mind needs in terms of wisdom to awaken, to get further into the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stage of enlightenment. But there's a certain amount of wisdom that you have at this point about wise decision-making and unwise decision-making, because that's what it took to get you to the jhanas. So you would have already had a certain amount of that under your belt by the time you get to these jhanas and you start experiencing them. Some more benefits of the jhanas is discontentedness is significantly reduced, but it's not yet eliminated. You're still going to be experiencing some sadness. You're still going to be experiencing some annoyance and irritation and frustration. These are things that are there, but they're going to be muted compared to where they were before you started practicing and getting to these jhanas. There's going to be more calmness and composure that is readily available and easily accessible to you, easily practiced, where other times you might notice that your mind might move to this heightened excitement or this disgruntledness, but you'll be able to bring in the calmness and composure at this point. You'll notice more awareness of the mind and more awareness of this interconnectivity of all beings, realizing that you're not in this world alone, but yet you are in this world alone, that you came into this world as a human being, and when you leave, you're going to leave alone by yourself, but yet there's this interconnectivity between all of us. So you'll feel closer to beings, not only human beings, but animals as well. You'll notice that you'll have this closeness and this connection with people, not an attachment, not a craving, but you'll just feel a bit more close to the people around you, because you're going to recognize this interconnectivity between all of us. You'll realize how your decisions impact others, and you'll be choosing to not do that. You'll be choosing to practice harmlessness from the Eightfold Path. Smiling becomes much easier, and there's a more cheerful disposition in the mind. If you notice that sometimes you're a little bit disgruntled or a little bit irritated or frustrated, you'll notice that the mind will be brightened up a bit with a more cheerful disposition, and you'll notice it'll be much easier for you to smile. If you've ever heard that Thailand is referred to as the land of smiles, this is why, because it's really easy to smile when you don't have pollution that's plaguing your mind. So as you're getting rid of more and more of this pollution, you'll notice that there's a more of ability to smile and a more cheerful disposition. You'll notice that it's easier to develop relationships with wholesome friends. You'll have certain wisdom to be able to involve certain wholesome friends in your life, and you'll notice that it's much easier to start interacting with people through the wisdom that you have about intentions, speech, and actions, and interacting with people, because you're not harming people as much by the time you get to the jhanas. So you'll notice that it'll be much easier for you to make friends and talk and interact with people. Here's the words of the Buddha on the jhanas, where he describes the jhanas in detail. I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to break it down, and I'm going to teach it to you so you can understand what each one of these jhanas are and what you're going to be experiencing. So here, the Buddha says this in the Eightfold Path. In what, monks, is right concentration? Here, a monk distant from sense desires, distant from unwholesome mental states, enters and resides in the first jhana, which is with thinking and pondering, based in seclusion, filled with excitement and joy. And with the subsiding of thinking and pondering, by gaining inner tranquility and oneness of mind, he enters and resides in the second jhana, which is without thinking and pondering, based in concentration, filled with excitement and joy. And with the fading away of excitement, remaining imperturbable, which means unable to be upset or excited, calm and serene, mindful and clearly aware, he experiences in himself the joy of which the noble ones say, "Peaceful is he who resides with equanimity and mindfulness." He enters the third jhana. And having given up pleasure and pain, and with the fading away of former gladness and sadness, he enters and resides in the fourth jhana, which is beyond pleasure and pain and purified by equanimity and mindfulness. This is called right concentration. So in the Eightfold Path, under this step of right concentration, he's explaining the results of having put together the entire Eightfold Path. He's explaining the results of what you're going to experience, which is these jhanas. But then in other teachings, he explains to you what right concentration is in terms of how to practice it. And that's what I taught you guys when I taught you right concentration. I taught you about meditation and practicing singleness of mind. That's how you develop right concentration. But here he's describing these jhanas, which is this meditative absorption or mental absorption, where you experience these deep and subtle states of concentration, where the mind can be relaxed and calm, but yet attentive and alert. So now let me show you how I break this down for you to be able to understand what each one of these jhanas are. The first jhana is where someone has distanced themselves from sensual desires. There's essentially two steps to eliminating a craving, desire, attachment. You need to first distance yourself from the object. Then you need to train your mind to eliminate that longing and yearning. So let me give you an example. If you ever had a particular craving, like let's just say for coffee or something else, you're going to need to distance yourself from that thing, where you no longer go into coffee shops, for example, or you no longer sit down with people who are drinking coffee for a period of time, to give your mind time to do some inner work. But you're going to need to distance yourself from the object so that the mind doesn't have a tendency to just grab it and start drinking caffeine, perhaps. And now, once you've distanced yourself from the object for a period of time, you're going to need to do the inner work to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment for that object. I'm just using coffee as an example. You could use this with any particular example of a craving, desire, attachment. So let's just say something I think we can probably all relate to. Let's say you're in a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend, and now you guys are having intimate contact all the way throughout your relationship. And now when the relationship is over, you guys go your separate ways. And now maybe you've been away from having a partner for 3 months or 6 months. You've been distant from that central desire, but the craving still exists in the mind. The craving for sexual contact still exists. So this is why you might end up getting another partner at some time and then having sexual contact. So the way to eliminate a craving, desire, attachment from the mind is to first distance yourself from it, and then do the inner work to fully eliminate it through training the mind with breathing mindfulness meditation, with generosity. And then whenever you notice that craving arising with your mindfulness, is you apply right effort to cut it off and let it go. That's how you eliminate a craving. Now, here in the first jhana, what the Buddha is describing is that you've just distanced yourself from certain central desires that the mind's longing and yearning for. Let's take a more simple one. Let's just say a piece of cake. Let's say that you really have a craving, desire, attachment for a chocolate cake. And whenever you go to this particular restaurant, you always order the chocolate cake. And now you notice that when you go to this restaurant and they don't have the cake, you get frustrated and you get agitated and you get annoyed. This is because of the craving that's in there. So by the time you get to the first jhana, you will have identified these types of cravings in the mind, and now you start distancing yourself from that object. Ultimately, with something like a piece of chocolate cake, when you eliminate the craving, desire, attachment, you'll be able to start eating chocolate cake again, right? There's nothing harmful with the chocolate cake potentially. But in certain situations, like really significant cravings, desires, attachments, like maybe like cocaine or crystal meth or alcohol, things like this, you need to completely eliminate that out of your life to be able to develop your mindfulness. But there are certain cravings that the mind can have that you need to just distance yourself from. Give it time to breathe, give it time to eliminate those craving, desire, attachments. Then ultimately you'll be able to experience that thing again. The craving, desire, attachment isn't the object itself. It's not the chocolate cake. It's not the coffee. It's not the one thing or another. It's inside the mind. It's the longing and yearning. So by distancing yourself from the object, it gives the mind time to then work on the craving and eliminate that. And in some situations, you're going to be able to then start potentially eating chocolate cake again. But in other situations, if you've fully eliminated a craving, you're not going to go back to that particular thing. So here, the first jhana, you will have distanced yourself from central desires because you would have realized what the problem is. What the real problem in the unenlightened mind is the central desire in the mind. The mind is longing and yearning through the sense bases, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. The mind is wanting permanently agreeable contact. The mind is chasing after pleasant feelings. If you get that chocolate cake, you get happy, you get excited, you get elated. But when it's not there, then you get frustrated or agitated or annoyed. And there are certain central desires that you have in your mind that if you acquire that thing, you get conditioned pleasant feelings. That the mind is conditioned to experience a pleasant feeling when you have that thing, based on the craving, desire, attachment. But then when you don't have that thing, the mind experiences the painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. So you would have seen this very clearly through learning the Four Noble Truths and the 6 sense bases, which what I'm going to teach you guys tomorrow, I think it is. I'm going to teach you guys the 6 sense bases so you can see what the mind's doing, that you can see the conditioned pleasant feelings as part of the problem. That by the time you get to enlightenment, you have unconditioned joy, where the mind is just always joyful, it's always happy. But as long as you allow the mind to get conditional happiness, where if it's sunny outside, you'll be happy. Or if your bank account is this, you'll be happy. Or if your mom calls you and says these things, then you'll be happy. Or if your boss does this, then you'll be happy. But when those things don't happen, then the mind's sad or angry or frustrated. That's conditional happiness or conditional pleasant feelings. So you would have seen those as part of the problem. So by the time you get to the first jhana, you will have distanced yourself from sensual desires. And then you would have also distanced yourself from certain unwholesome mental states. You haven't fully eliminated all the unwholesome mental states yet, but you would have distanced yourself from certain unwholesome mental states. Then in the first jhana, there's something called thinking and pondering. What this is that prior to being on the path to enlightenment, the way I describe it is we're kind of like plowing through the forest, knocking down the trees, burning up the forest. We don't really care about the decisions we're making. It's all about pleasing ourselves, our own selfish desires. We're just kind of plowing through the forest, knocking down the trees, burning up the forest. And we look behind us and there's a whole path of destruction sometimes. There's all these fires and we're like, who lit the fire? Why is there so much smoke around here? Well, it was us that was doing that because we weren't thinking about our decisions. We were making unwise decisions about our life and we were just plowing through the forest, knocking down the trees. But by the time you learn the Eightfold Path deeply and you're starting to practice it and you're starting to notice that it's actually working, then what you're going to start doing is having this thinking and pondering, that any decision that you start making or any decisions that you're considering making, you'll probably start thinking and pondering based on the Eightfold Path. How should I make this decision? You'll kind of slow down a bit and you'll start comparing and contrasting the teachings of the Buddha to any particular decision that you're about to make. And this is what's going to help you to cultivate your wisdom. By the time you get to enlightenment, you've essentially fully upgraded your operating system, right? If you have a computer and you're on an old archaic operating system, it's kind of slow, it's kind of dull, it's kind of lethargic, it doesn't really function so well. But then eventually you upgrade your operating system on the computer and now it performs really, really well. So on your way to enlightenment, there's this thinking and pondering that you're doing where you're comparing and contrasting certain decisions that you're about to make, reflecting on those based on the Eightfold Path and the teachings of the Buddha. And this is actually helping you to build your wisdom. But once you fully have done all of this thinking and pondering, because you're going to see here in a moment in one of the jhanas, you actually have eliminated the thinking and pondering. You understand the teachings really well, and you can just make decisions through this new operating system, so to speak. So there's this thinking and pondering in the first jhana. The mind can almost become obsessive, thinking through all the various teachings and what it is that you're about to do and ensuring that you're making wise decisions because you're disinterested in making unwise decisions. You'll notice that the mind is filled with this excitement and joy. This is where when the mind first breaks through to that first jhana, there can be this ultimate bliss that's in the mind. There's this bliss that comes into the mind, this real excitement and joy. Excitement is a conditioned feeling where it's based on some condition. The joy is an unconditioned mental quality versus the excitement being a conditioned feeling. So you can notice this kind of breakthrough of this bliss that comes through the mind when you start experiencing this jhana, this first one. Now, after being in the first jhana and continuing to focus on the Eightfold Path, you might notice that the mind's starting to experience the second jhana, whereas there's this subsiding of the thinking and pondering. You're not doing as much of it anymore. Where in the first jhana, your mind might be a bit obsessive about this thinking and pondering. By the time you get to the second jhana, it's starting to subside a little bit. You're still doing the thinking and pondering, but just not as obsessive as you might have been doing it in the first jhana. There's more inner tranquility, this calmness and composure that comes into the mind. And this is where you experience oneness of mind, or sometimes we refer to it as unification of the mind. This is where there's no longer a subconscious mind and you have full awareness of the entire mind. Then there's this concentration or singleness of mind that's there. By the time you move out of the second jhana, the thinking and pondering is done. You've done so much thinking and pondering. You've developed so much wisdom. You don't need to go through each decision in such a slow and methodic way as you once did. You're still going to think through your decisions and make wise decisions. You're not going to be making rapid decisions in your life, but you're thinking and pondering where you're in deep, deep, deep reflection all the time and maybe thinking about every last little decision. You will have cultivated a certain amount of wisdom where you won't need to do that so much anymore. And then the mind is still filled with this excitement and joy in the mind, this bliss. And then moving to the third jhana, there's this fading away of excitement. And remember, when we're talking about the fading away of excitement, we're talking about conditional excitement. We're not talking about this unconditioned joy where the mind can just always be joyful, always bright, always radiant. No matter what's going on, you can just always maintain your joy. That's the joy. This excitement that we're talking about that's fading away is the conditional excitement. Because you're distancing yourself from the central desires, you're no longer basing your inner feelings on some condition. You'll notice that the conditional excitement starts to fade away a bit, and you're going to notice more and more of the unconditioned joy starting to shine through. This is where the mind gets to this imperturbable that the Buddha is talking about, where it's unable to be excited in terms of conditional excitement, not in terms of the joy, where you can have fun, you can have enjoyment. Getting to enlightenment isn't dull, right? It's not like you sit around and be solemn all the time. There's quite a bit of fun, way, way, way more fun than you ever experienced in your unenlightened state. Because in the unenlightened state, whatever excitement that you experienced, it was only temporary. It's going to leave you at some point. So ultimately, your mind's going to end up in the painful feelings. So by the time you get to enlightenment, the joy that you experience is just always there. It's persistent. It's just always existing. So it's important to understand this fading away of excitement is conditional excitement. And then you'll have this mindfulness and you'll be clearly aware of the entire mind. You'll notice this more unconditioned joy starting to come through the mind, where you'll just be sitting around doing nothing and you're just joyful for no reason. There's no reason for the joy. The mind is just joyful. You'll notice these glimpses of this, right? This is what the experiencing of the joy is. Peacefully residing with equanimity and mindfulness. Equanimity is calmness and composure, even in a difficult situation. Where right now, if you got a phone call that your mom was in the hospital and she was in a terrible car accident, your mind might get shaken up by that potentially. And you might feel like you want to run out and just run to her side and be in the hospital right away. And you just bolt and take off to the hospital. But by the time you experience more and more equanimity and you're cultivating this in the mind, you have calmness and composure, even in difficult situations where your mom's in the hospital and you just got a phone call, because you realize that it's unwise to allow your mind to be uncalm. If your mind is uncalm, then you're not going to have mindfulness or awareness of mind. And if you lack mindfulness, then you're going to lack concentration. And if you lack concentration, you're going to lack the ability to access your wisdom and make wise decisions. This is why if you get a phone call that your mom's in the hospital, you might grab your car keys, bolt out of the house and run across town. Maybe you get into a car accident yourself and end up in the hospital next to her, right? So that's the unwise decision, because the mind is uncalm. There's no mindfulness, there's no concentration, and you're not thinking clearly. You don't have access to your wisdom. But when you practice equanimity, you can have calmness and composure, and you can have mindfulness or awareness of mind, you can have concentration, and now you can experience the accessing of wisdom, and you can continue to make wise decisions. Because in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to be making 100% of wise decisions at all times. That's what's going to produce the wholesome results in your life. So now moving into the fourth, let me back up. Peacefully residing with equanimity. I just described equanimity. What mindfulness is awareness of mind, where you have awareness of the mind. More specifically, the four foundations of mindfulness. This is being aware of the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness that's arising, being aware of the feelings, being aware of the condition of the mind and the mental objects. I taught this as part of the Eightfold Path, that before your mind gets angry, before you get frustrated, before you get irritated, there's going to be some bodily sensation that you may or may not be aware of right now. You might notice tingling in the body, tightening in the chest, pain around the heart. You might notice tightening in the throat, heat in the face. You might notice pressure in the skull. This is like an early warning system alerting you that, hey, your mind's about to become discontent. And you've got the ability to take action when you notice those bodily sensations, and you can cut off and let go at that point so that the mind doesn't experience the feeling of frustration, because that's what's next. This is the second foundation of mindfulness, that you're going to need to build awareness of the bodily sensations that are precursors or early warning system that your mind's about to become discontent. You're going to need to build awareness of the feelings that are in the mind. And if you didn't cut it off as a bodily sensation, then you're going to need to cut it off as a feeling, because you're trying to rewire the mind so that it doesn't get these conditioned feelings anymore, that you're trying to rewire this mind. You're not suppressing your feelings. You're actually cutting it off as a bodily sensation before it's even become a feeling. But because you don't have full awareness of the bodily sensations yet, you're going to experience some feelings. You're going to get annoyed. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to feel shyness or embarrassed or other things like this. And if you can catch it as a bodily sensation, cut it off there. But if not, if it becomes a feeling, cut it off there. Right? Because if you don't cut it off as a feeling, it's now going to affect the condition of your mind more long term, for several hours, for a couple of days. Have you ever been agitated for like a week or two? Have you ever been agitated for a week or two? Yeah, of course you have, right? This is what we experience in the unenlightened state, where we didn't understand these 4 foundations of mindfulness, so we didn't cut it off as a bodily sensation. We didn't cut it off as a feeling. We didn't cut it off as a condition of the mind. And then what happens is it feeds what's called a mental object. A mental object is a deeply rooted container that is deeply rooted in the mind. All these 10 fetters, all these pollutions, all these defilements and taints, those are all mental objects. So in this example of anger, if you missed it as a bodily sensation, you missed it as a feeling, you missed it as a condition of the mind, and now you're kind of persistently over the next couple hours or days angry and frustrated, it's going to feed this mental object of ill will. And now it's just feeding that more and more. And what the Buddha is teaching you to do with mindfulness is to cut that off as a bodily sensation so that you preserve the mind and you protect your contentedness. It's kind of like if you were going to take a boat from Australia to Indonesia, you would like to prevent the water from ever coming into the boat. Because once the water gets in the boat, you've got a real problem to deal with. So once the mind becomes angry or frustrated, you can still cut it off and let it go there, but now you've got a real problem to deal with. It's a lot harder to get out of the mind. So if you can catch it as a bodily sensation with your mindfulness, you'll save yourself a whole lot of trouble that your mind never experienced, that conditioned feeling. And this is where you can really transform the mind, because if you're able to identify it as a bodily sensation and cut it off, the mind's really close to enlightenment at this point. So that's what the Buddha is talking about here, is residing with mindfulness, that you're fully aware of your mind by this point, by the time you get to the 3rd jhana. Now, the 4th jhana is giving up pleasure and pain. What this is referring to is the conditional pleasantness and the conditional pain. Like I said, by the time you get into these jhanas and into the stages of enlightenment, you're going to be experiencing plenty of pleasure, but it's not going to be conditional experiences. It's just always going to be joyful. So by the time your mind gets to this 4th jhana, you've seen the problem really well, and you know that it's not wise to continue to chase after sensual desires. That continuing to chase after them is just going to produce discontent feelings, and you're going to be left with painful feelings. So if you allow the mind to chase after pleasantness and you get a conditioned pleasant feeling, then it's only a matter of time before it ends up in the painful feelings of sadness and anger and frustration. So you will have given that up and realized that, okay, you're going to move beyond this. Then there's going to be this fading away of the former gladness and sadness. You'll notice even a more significant decrease in the discontentedness by this point, the conditional feelings. And then the Buddha shares here, the mind's beyond pleasure and pain, that it's no longer experiencing the severe ups and downs that we maybe once experienced in the unenlightened state, that the mind is now beyond all of that. And the mind still has this equanimity and mindfulness, having been brought to full development and full perfection at this point, that you'll be able to notice that you can be calm and composed in difficult situations and have full awareness of those 4 foundations of mindfulness. So do you guys have any questions on any of the individual jhanas? No questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any online either. Okay. So now let's go into some more words of the Buddha where he's describing what you're going to experience in these jhanas. So here the Buddha is describing that once you get into the jhanas, you have blindfolded Mara. And these are his words here that I've extracted for you to be able to see. What Mara is this formless being that you may refer to in the past as the devil or Satan. These are things that you don't believe in, but if you've ever had contact with this particular being, this being is interested in causing calamity in the world and influencing unwholesome things to happen in the world. And this being is going to try to influence you, and beings operating on Mara's behalf, going to try to tempt you with certain sensual desires, trying to tempt you to do unwholesome things. So by the time you get into the 1st jhana, the Buddha says you've blindfolded Mara, that Mara is no longer going to try to tempt you. And the reason why is because you now have the wisdom to know what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. And Mara knows that they can't influence you. This being can't influence you any longer. So getting into the jhanas, you will have blindfolded Mara. You'll be secure from danger. Here, I'll read this one to you. The Buddha says, so too, monks, when distant from sense desires, distant from unwholesome mental states, enters and resides in the first jhana, which is with thinking and pondering, based in seclusion, filled with excitement and joy. On that occasion, it occurs to that monk, now I am secure from danger, and Mara cannot do anything with me. It also occurs to Mara, the evil one. Now the monk is secure against danger, and I cannot do anything to him. So Mara is no longer going to try to tempt you once you get into this first jhana. Then here, the next one is that you'll experience this higher mind. This is like a higher consciousness because there's been a certain amount of pollution that's come out of the mind. Here you can see what the Buddha says. If a monk should aspire, may I become one to obtain at will, without trouble or difficulty, the 4 jhanas that constitute the higher mind and provide a peaceful residing here and now, let him fulfill the precepts. That it's the precepts and all those other moral conduct and the teachings from the Eightfold Path that are going to help you to be able to experience this higher mind, because now you have a certain amount of wisdom that you didn't have before, and you know what's wholesome and unwholesome, and your mind's now making decisions based on this new upgraded operating system, the way I describe it. So these jhanas lead to enlightenment. Here you can see what the Buddha says. He says, monks, just as the river Ganges slants slopes and inclines towards the east, so too a monk who develops and cultivates the 4 jhanas slants slopes and inclines towards nibbana or enlightenment. So by getting into the jhanas, you're developing the qualities that you need to then make the rest of your way to enlightenment itself. Those qualities that we were just talking about, those are qualities that you're going to need to be able to now make your way the rest of the way to enlightenment. So it slants, slopes, and inclines. When you get into these jhanas, it leads towards enlightenment. If you happen to die in the jhanas, there's an improved rebirth. But remember, that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal isn't to be reborn. It's to get to enlightenment in this life so that now you can experience the peace and joy for the rest of this life, and you're no longer reborn anywhere in terms of the cycle of rebirth. But if somebody does die in the jhanas, there can be this improved rebirth. Here, the Buddha is talking about rebirth into the heavenly realm, and that's what he's describing here for you. The Buddha also shares about inconceivable matters. There are certain things that he teaches that he says, these are inconceivable. You shouldn't even try to conceive these kinds of things. And one of the things that he says that you shouldn't even try to conceive is what you will experience as an individual is in these jhanas. It's important to know what the jhanas are so that you can have an indication of your mind being in the jhanas, but trying to divulge into exactly what you're going to be experiencing when your mind is in those jhanas. The Buddha says this is an inconceivable matter. In other words, how could you describe chocolate ice cream if you've never tasted chocolate ice cream? You're going to need to taste chocolate ice cream to be able to describe it. So the Buddha is saying you're not going to really be able to understand and know what the jhanas are until you're actually experiencing them. And he says if you tried to essentially really peer into this and try to understand it inside and out, backwards and forwards, that it would lead to either madness or frustration, because you can't truly 100% know what these jhanas are until you're actually experiencing them. And then as you experience them, you'll know what they are. So he's saying this is an inconceivable matter, but you're going to need to know a bit about these jhanas so that you can know that you're starting to experience them. Here's some more words from the Buddha about how to attain the jhanas. He talks about eliminating the 5 hindrances. The 5 hindrances are something that I teach at different times in the various courses and programs that I teach. These are 5 hindrances to enlightenment. And he talks about sensual desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness and worry, and then doubt. And we're going to be discussing these as part of the fetters, that we're going to be talking about doubt. But let me just kind of describe a little bit about these. Central desire is the longing and yearning through the sense bases. You're going to be learning about this with the 6 sense bases, that the mind is longing and yearning through these sense bases, craving permanently agreeable contact. And when you experience disagreeable contact, the mind experiences those painful feelings. Then there's ill will. This is the bitterness, the hostility, the animosity. Then there's complacency, which is a lack of motivation, a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of initiative. Then there's restlessness and worry. This is like anxiety, an overactive mind. And then there's doubt, where an individual coming to the path to enlightenment, they will have doubt about the teachings. They will have doubt about the Buddha. They will have doubt about the teachings, typically. They will have doubt about the community that you're part of. You might have doubt about your teacher, whether they can truly guide you to enlightenment. You might have doubt about yourself and whether you have the capability to get to enlightenment. So we're going to talk about doubt and how to eradicate this as part of this retreat. You don't eradicate it through blind belief or through faith. You eradicate it through investigating the teachings. And as you're investigating and examining the teachings and you're implementing them, you're going to see more improvement to the condition of the mind. That's how you eliminate doubt. As you're starting to notice these improved conditions of mind as you get into the jhanas, this is the point where doubt starts to be eliminated significantly. That by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will have completely eliminated any doubt. You won't be enlightened yet, but you'll know that these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind and an improved condition of your life. So the way you eliminate doubt is through investigating and examining the teachings. So by the time you get to the jhanas, you will understand what these are. You won't have fully eliminated them yet, but you will be aware of them when they arise so that you can continue to work towards eliminating them. Meditation leads towards the jhanas. Here the Buddha says, monks, if for just the time of a finger snap, a monk develops mindfulness of breathing, he is called a monk who is not lacking of jhana, who acts upon the teachings of the teacher, who responds to his advice, and who does not eat the country's alms food, having produced no results or benefits. How much more than those who cultivate it? So as you're cultivating breathing mindfulness meditation, this is what's going to help you get to the jhanas, because you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment, and you're cultivating the mindfulness and concentration. And then you will have already eliminated the selfishness by the time you get into the jhanas, that you're no longer selfish, that you're practicing generosity, like what you guys did today, going to the orphanage. And some of you guys didn't go, but you contributed funds to be able to provide for that. So by the time you get to the jhanas, you will have eliminated selfishness in regards to dwellings, meaning sharing your dwelling. Like if you had a friend or family member or somebody that needed a place to stay, you'd be freely willing to share your dwelling. That you wouldn't be selfish in regards to families, and the family that you have, you would be able to share readily with your family. That you wouldn't be selfish in regard to your material possessions, that you'd be able to share the things that you have. That you wouldn't have selfishness in regard to praise, that you're willing to praise other people when you see them doing good, that you're not just degrading and diminishing people, but then you can praise people and tell people when they're doing good, and you're okay to be able to do that. You're not holding that back. And you're not selfish in regards to the teachings, that as you've been learning these teachings and you see an improved condition of mind, if somebody asks you a question, you'd be willing to share that. Like, hey, here's a book, or hey, here's a link that you could use, or hey, here's a class or a course that you might consider taking, that you wouldn't just be holding on to the teachings for yourself, that you will have seen the improvement to the condition of your mind by the time you get to the jhanas, and you would freely be willing to share the teachings if somebody asked you of something that they needed, maybe a book or some insight or a link or a video or something like this. So this is some of the teachings that you would need to practice in order to experience the jhanas. Here's those same things, just kind of in a different format so that you can see what the Buddha was teaching. And here's a reference for you, because in that previous slides, I didn't have the references in there. I typically like to share the references so that you guys know that what I'm sharing with you comes from the original source teachings of the Pali Canon. So here you can see the reference. And you can also see the Buddha talking about that one would be incapable of getting to arahantship, which is enlightenment itself, without eliminating selfishness. There's a certain amount of generosity that you would be practicing by the time you get to the jhanas. And generosity is the giving and sharing of more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. And that's what's going to help you eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments, because the mind tends to be selfish when it has craving. It tends to hold on. But by the time you're practicing generosity, you're freely willing to give and share with the people around you. And that's what's going to help you to ultimately get to enlightenment as an arahant. So just to kind of share some summary things here, and then I'll open up to anything that you guys would like to talk about, either here at the temple or online, that Once you start noticing the jhanas, that's a time to focus on the 10 fetters. I've shared that before, but I would just like to recap that so you know that you need to pivot your practice at that point. That you're noticing this improvement to the condition of the mind, but now to progress into the stages of enlightenment, you're going to need to maintain the current life practice that you have of the Eightfold Path, and then you're going to need to further develop your life practice even further and kind of dialing it in even closer and closer. This ensures that you're not going to become complacent and conceited, that as you're experiencing these various qualities of the jhanas, you would like to be sure that you've eliminated any complacency where the mind is dull or lethargic. Maybe you're not interested in doing meditation for an extended period of time. By the time you get into the jhanas, you will have seen the significant improvement to the condition of the mind, and you won't go a week without meditating or 2 weeks without meditating. You will be consistent with your meditation practice by that point, and you will have eliminated the complacency. And you would like to continue to work towards eliminating conceit. Conceit doesn't get fully eliminated until you're in the 4th stage of enlightenment, but up until this point, you need to gradually be wearing it away slowly but surely, because conceit is oftentimes something that is very hard for the mind to eliminate. It often takes many years for the mind to eliminate conceit. This is the arrogance, the pride, the boastfulness, the measuring and comparing, judging other people, putting yourself above people or putting yourself below people. Putting yourself below people is just as dangerous as putting yourself above people. Where this is coming from is in our previous existences as animals, we needed to have conceit. We needed to have a pecking order. When we were elephants and we were an elephant herd, we needed the matriarch of our herd to be able to show us where the watering holes were, where the food was, where the migration paths were. So we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd. When we were a pack of wolves, we needed to know who's the alpha male, who's the alpha female, because they're breeding and they're showing us how to hunt. They're showing us how to survive. We need to follow those people. But when we come into this human world, we tend to maintain this ego and this conceit of putting people above us or putting people below us. And now we might talk down to people in an arrogant and boastful way, or we might put ourselves below people. But what you would ultimately like to get to is where you view everybody as equal. You don't see yourself as above people. You don't see yourself as below people. Because here in the human realm, we don't need a pecking order. We can just look at everybody as equal, being equal. But it takes a lot of time to gradually wear this away. And there's a chapter in volume 1, chapter 16, that teaches you how to dissolve the ego. And I teach classes on this, and it's something that's going to be needing to be developed and practiced on a consistent long-term basis. So when you're getting into the jhanas, those qualities can feel so blissful. It's important to remind yourself you're not done yet. You've done a lot of work to get to the jhanas, but you're not done yet. The real work is really just beginning, because now you've gotten all the tools you need to really start focusing on eliminating the individual fetters. And then lastly, I share this, is that as you're going into the jhanas and you're starting to experience this is like the light bulb flickering. Don't let it go out. Don't let the light bulb go out. Continue to stay dedicated and diligent, stay focused, stay determined, dedicated to your practice. Continue to practice what got you to the jhanas, which is the Eightfold Path. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're never going to stop practicing the Eightfold Path, but you're going to be doing it effortlessly. Getting up to the enlightened mental state, it's a real challenge to dial this Eightfold Path in, particularly around speech. If you have craving, desire, attachment, you might have people in your life that you speak harsh and aggressive and hostile to, but more and more you can dial this in closer and closer, and that's what's going to get you into the jhanas and then ultimately to enlightenment. And it can feel like a real struggle as you're doing that, but that's what got you to the jhanas. So don't slack off on the Eightfold Path. Continue to dial that in closer and closer, because that's what's going to continue to propel you into the 4 stages of enlightenment. So this is what I have to share with you at this point about the jhanas. I typically teach to a certain level of detail, and then I wait for people to ask questions to go deeper down into it. So if there's anything you guys would like to go deeper into related to these jhanas, or the attainment of them, the benefits of them, or anything like this, feel free to ask questions. Those of you guys online, you can ask questions by putting it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can also raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Looks like we have a question here.
Okay, this works. Can you talk a little bit more about Mara? I didn't understand.
Sure. This being is going to try to influence you to do unwise things through your mind. And whether you do those things or not is your choice. Mara can't force you to do anything, but Mara can influence you to do this. It's a formless being. some people can see this being. Some people have had interaction with this being. I've had interaction with this being. It tries to cause calamity in the world by influencing you to do unwise things. But whether you choose to do those things or not is your choice. And as you choose to do those unwise things that Mara is trying to influence you to do, you're going to experience the results of those, not Mara, right? So you would like to not be scared of this being, not be fearful of this being, because that being feeds off of that. And the more that you train your mind and you cultivate wisdom, you won't have anything to worry about with this being. What protects you in this life is not a house, is not bodyguards, is not a gun, not a knife, all of these things. What provides you protection in this world is your decision making. By making wise decisions, that's what's going to protect you. So by you cultivating wisdom, no matter what Mara is trying to do, you can make wise decisions and you won't be influenced by Mara. And that's what happens by the time you get to the jhanas. But up until that time, Mara is going to try to influence you to do unwholesome and unwise things. But ultimately, it's your choice, and whatever decisions you make, you're going to experience the results of those. Is there anything specific that you would like to know about Mara?
Does it like come to you through person, to people, or it's like an entity? Or like there are people that are maybe close to you that, and Mara acts through those people to temptate you?
Yeah, so Mara is going to try to influence all beings to do unwholesome, unwise things, to produce unwholesome results in the world and calamity. So Mara can try to influence another human being. And now that human being being influenced by Mara, making unwise decisions, can then try to influence you. That's a possibility, but that's not Mara directly. That's through that human being. But Mara can actually try to influence you directly, can come into your mind and try to influence you to make unwise decisions. If you're ever sitting around and you just start having all these unwholesome thoughts, things that you know you would never do, like maybe punch somebody or kill somebody or walk out in front of a car or jump off of a building, or maybe you're standing on like a second floor of a mall and you look over and you have this urge to maybe jump over, but you're like, why would I do that? That's really silly for me to do that. This is Mara trying to influence you to do unwise things, but it's your decision making that's going to protect you against that. Any other questions? Okay, I think you guys are sufficiently tired, huh? Had a big day today. All right. So you guys did something really wonderful today by going to visit this orphanage, and you guys see that they're in the state of construction and developing. And I think it was really wonderful to see that our plans changed so much along the way. And I didn't see anybody getting frustrated or irritated or agitated. You guys just maintained your contentedness, realizing that this is just all impermanence. There was a bunch of changes along the way. I think our driver might have been getting more frustrated than anybody else, right? Like he was kind of been out of shape a little bit. So thank you guys for choosing to practice generosity. We did something really wonderful to help those people, and they obviously really need it. You guys didn't see where they were before. What they're building now is far beyond anything that they were experiencing before in terms of where they were living. And now it looks like he's taken out a loan, and now he's trying to build something even nicer since his children are growing older. So this was great that we were able to provide that food for them. And you saw they started eating it right away when we got there. So they're obviously hungry. So thank you guys for choosing to practice some generosity and be so wonderful with each other, because I was hearing a lot of nice conversations in the van, and I'm sure in your car you guys were having some great conversations. And that's one of the benefits of coming together in a retreat like this, is you get to know different people, you get to build relationships, and that's a really wonderful thing that I heard you guys doing and having conversations. So thank you guys for understanding all the impermanence and just going with the flow, right? Just going with the flow. So bye, right? So tomorrow I'm going to continue to be teaching you guys. We're going to start off with breathing mindfulness meditation, and you guys can be doing this in the seated, lying, or standing position. I'm going to be starting off in the morning with understanding human beings. We're going to be talking about the 5 aggregates and the 6 sense spaces. This is where you're going to understand this being who you are and what you're really experiencing in terms of the 5 aggregates and the 6 sense spaces, because this is going to help you to understand your mind and what you need to be doing on the path to enlightenment. After I explain all of those things, then we're going to be talking about dependent origination. While so far you've learned the 4 noble truths and you've learned the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires, now we're going to go in and you're going to see the detailed teaching of the Buddha. This is the highest ultimate truth, where he explains to you in 12 interlinking steps exactly why your mind's experiencing discontentedness and why you're experiencing rebirth. For those of you guys that are maybe interested at some point to independently confirm the cycle of rebirth, this is one of the steps that you would need to do, is develop this understanding of this teaching in order to understand why you keep coming back into the world over and over and over again, and why your mind keeps experiencing discontentedness. Remember, this is a teaching that you can independently verify. All of his teachings are that way, that you learn it, you reflect on it, independently verify it, and practice it. So I'm going to teach you this, and we often refer to it as the highest law of nature because it explains exactly why you're experiencing everything you experience in this life in terms of the discontentedness and continuous rebirth. And then I'm going to teach you guys developing accomplishment in view to attain the first stage of enlightenment. You guys have learned right view and establishing right view, which is the Four Noble Truths, but there's something called accomplishment in view that you're going to need to understand in order to get to this first stage of enlightenment. Then after that, we're going to go to our excursion. For those of you guys that would like to go, the plan is to go to Hua Tung Tao. It's a big reservoir, a big park, kind of a nature area. And they've got bungalows around the reservoir, around the lake. And they have amazing food at really low cost. We pay a little bit of money to get into the park. I think it's like 50 baht to get into the park. But then you've got this whole nature area to walk around, to spend time at the bungalows, hanging out, talking. You can go into the reservoir and swim if you like, although it's probably a little bit cool. So this is a great time now that our retreat's going to be coming to a close on Friday, that you can kind of hang out and spend time talking with each other. There's a massage place over there. There's a coffee shop. There's lots of great food. There's swimming, there's a zip line, there's some various things, there's ice cream. So it's just a time to really kind of hang out and relax. So if you guys would like to go, you're welcome and invited to go to this. Just to kind of give a heads up so that I can organize any kind of transportation. Is there anybody who is considering going to this and would like to go to this? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're actually leaving earlier tomorrow because we're going to eat lunch over there. We're going to leave here at exactly 12:30 or whatever time we finish with our talk. It should be right around 12:30. So we're going to just go there right away, and then we're going to have great food. It's amazing food over there. My son and I just went like a week or two ago, and we had a blast. We had a really good time. So you're going to go? Okay, let me take another count one more time. So 1, you raise your hand, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Okay, so we're going to need a van for sure. I'm going to get the same guy. Did you guys raise your hand? You guys raised your hand, right? Jeannie and Alan, are you guys going to bring your car in case we need it tomorrow? Okay, that'll be good. That'll give us overflow for that. Okay, so that's what we'll do tomorrow. And we'll get back here probably around 5:36, and we can eat lunch and dinner over there if you guys would like. There's lots of places to walk and go on nature trails and all kinds of stuff and hang out. So it'll be a great time for us. So thank you all for your questions. Thank you for your dedication and diligence to learning. And perhaps we'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a lovely rest of your day. Sawadee khap. Sawadee khap. Sawadee khap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.